I'm your host tonight. For those of you who don't know me, I'm John Morrison. I'm the Associate Director here at the Center. Dan sends you his greetings from Ecuador.
Oh.
He's at a wedding in the rainforest in Ecuador this week with his wife. So he'll be back next week, but he sends his greetings to you from there. Once again, I'm glad to start the 2013-14 Planet Ocean series, and I want to apologize because it was kind of confused, a little bit confused last year with all the construction going on campus, a lot of them for safety issues. As you saw when you came in, the building is finished now. We've just begun moving staff into it. The scientists should begin moving soon from our side, and they're out marketing the rest. Hopefully we'll have it occupied as quickly as possible. If you looked at the schedule for this year, we're actually have you scheduled in February to take you through the center. Dan will talk to you about the concept. At that point, the university should have fleshed out what they think this new campus is, now that we're in the Crest campus, which is the campus for research, entrepreneurship, science, teaching, research and teaching. Sorry, it's a mouthful. And they're still working on how the management structure for that will be, but Dan will be actually moving to the new building at some point soon. He's moving as soon as he gets back. But we have, I think, a good lineup this year besides the talk tonight. We will have a special talk by a scientist. There's a scientist series supported by Ocean Leadership out of Washington, which is our main lobbying agency for the community. It's not a lobbying agency, it's, what's the other word? You can't lobby, you can, advocacy agency. And they have a special, and he's going to actually talk to you about the tsunami in Japan that caused the problem with Fukuyama power plants. And then the new biochemical building, and then actually the president and CEO of Ocean Leadership will be coming in for the last talk in April. Hopefully he'll be able at that point to give you a good summary or explanation of what's going on in marine science with all the budget crisis that's going on. He spends a lot of time on the Hill. He's very strong with him. Actually, I will spend a week in October doing advocacy with him in Washington. In October, we do it again in March, and then he'll come right after after Ocean Science Week on the Hill. In March, he'll be here at the beginning of April, so he should have a really nice presentation for you guys. Tonight, I have the pleasure of introducing Deb Mosca, who actually is a resident of this building. We keep her hidden behind the fish tank, so if you haven't seen her, Deb is actually is the first of the commercial residents of the Crest campus. She's the Chief Executive Officer of Marine Biotechnology Center of Innovation, which is funded by North Carolina Biotech, right?
Correct.
She has 30 years of experience in biotechnology. She's worked with various biotech companies such as PacBax, Neuris, Elytra, Interbiotics. She's also worked for the Scripps Foundation for research and also a large pharma with American Cyanamid and one of their labs. Her specialty is evaluation of natural products from terrestrial and marine sources for any effective oncological and agricultural applications, which makes her fit right in with the concept of the Marine Biotech Center that's opening now with the new Biotic building. She's worked on a lot of different multidisciplinary projects dealing with discovery and development of these novel therapeutic drugs discoveries over the years. And you've been here, what, about 18 months now?
About
15 months, okay. Deb has her BS in biology and genetics from Cornell and her doctorate in biology from State University of New York at Buffalo. And tonight she's going to talk to us about bringing innovation to light, translating marine science into products. Deb Mosca.
Thank you, John. That was a wonderful introduction. I appreciate all the history. It makes me feel a little old. And here. Okay. So I try not to shout, so I'll raise my volume a little. Is this better? Can everybody hear in the back? You still can't hear?
No. Where's the mic?
John, do you have a mic? Tell you what, maybe if I come a little closer, it might
The mic's
resonate.
here, but I just don't think it's working.
Okay. Is this any better for you? Still not good for you?
Let me get the boss.
Yeah, the boss is next door. Well, sorry for the technical difficulties. Obviously, it's not a marine biotechnology difficulty. It's just a general technology difficulty. Hi, boss. Hi. See, this is why we always joke that when you have people who lead organizations, think they do all the work. No, they don't. It's people like Melissa who make it all happen. Okay, so, is this working?
Yeah.
Just gotta find a good pocket for it. Okay, how is that? Can you hear me now? A little better. Tell you what, I'll just hold it. Maybe that's a little bit better and make it closer. Is that good?
Yeah.
All right. So what I wanted to do tonight is to try to explain to you how the Marine Biotechnology Center of Innovation came to be and what our vision and mission and goals are going forward. Firstly, what is marine biotechnology? A lot of people think biotechnology has only to do with recombinant DNA and some sort of Star Trek kind of application, but that's not true. We define it as a unique form. It's unlike other types of biotechnology in that it can be defined either in terms of its source or in the market it serves. If you go to our website, and I have some brochures up here for you to take with you that you can use to get back to our information online. We define marine as anything from or affecting the sea. Makes sense. Bio, affecting life. Everybody understands bio, life. And technology is applying knowledge. So basically, it's everything. Because anything from the terrestrial environment might be useful in a marine environment. So we really have to be very broad in our search for marine biotechnologies. Why marine biotechnologies? Well, diversity. If you think about it, the oceans cover more than 70% of the Earth's surface. That's a lot. Genetically, marine organisms are very different in terms of their evolution and development. So therefore, they're going to be different than terrestrial land-based organisms. And chemically, the nutrients and conditions in the oceans are, of course, very broad, very vast, and very different from the land. And as a result, it fosters the development of unique organisms with unique bioactivities. And indeed, some of that effort is ongoing here at the Center for Marine Science as part of the Marine Biotechnology program and looking for novel chemistries from the marine environment. How many of you heard of the Centers of Innovation program from the North Carolina Biotechnology Center? Okay, a few of you, that's good. Well, one of the things we're trying to do is to raise the awareness. It was established by the Biotechnology Center with a special grant from the state to encourage innovation and focus on commercialization of those technologies that are strengths within the state and therefore create new jobs. There are several centers of innovation that have come before. One is Ability and also the Center of Innovation for Nanobiotechnology. The COIN Center of Innovation has now been merged with the Nanotechnology Center in Greensboro. Ability is off and running in terms of developing new medical devices from Mission Hospital. They're actually serving as a development group for them and doing very, very well. And the Marine Biotechnology Center of Innovation was envisioned to explore the opportunities to translate marine research into new products and services. Why marine biotechnology? What's the market for it? Well, this is just an example of one report that came out last year on the global market for marine biotechnology. And as you might expect, most of the people concentrate on the healthcare industry, healthcare and biotech. That would be your pharmaceuticals, your nutraceuticals, things along those lines. But there is a large area of growth in other areas, consumer products, these would be cosmeceuticals. Many of the ingredients, especially in the high-end cosmeceuticals, to try to treat wrinkles and puff up that skin and make you look a little younger, actually come from marine organisms, especially algae. And then there are some interests in industrial products and other services. So while these look pretty flat, there is always interest in continued growth in the healthcare and biotechnology area. Probably what's most complex is to explain the relationships in marine biotechnology. I tried at the beginning of the very broad definition of marine biotechnology, and now you can see some of the areas that it could be applied to. Energy. How many people have heard of algae as biofuels? Okay. Well, they actually are quite good in terms of producing fuel. The problem is they're not competitive commercially with fuel from oil. At least not yet. Maybe in another 10 or 20 years when oil prices go up, it would become more commercially viable. At the same time, technology has to continue to develop, and people are continuing to work on making the process of developing fuel out of algae more efficient. So right now, a lot of the companies and organizations that were exploring that are turning their attention to algae as a source of other products, such as food. There is a researcher at North Carolina State who's looked at algae as a source of protein, a very high-value protein called rubisco. And its properties are such that it's like egg white. So egg white commands $7 a pound. So if you can isolate that quality of protein from algae that you can grow in 100,000 liter vats and then extract the protein and sell it, you would have a very nice commercial market. But the trick is to always make that process economically viable. So what we're looking at is how do we take the resources and knowledge we already have and turn it into new products and services when the one you wanted, fuel, didn't quite work out. So another application is omega-3. How many people take omega-3 or fish oil of some sort? Okay. Did you know that the fish don't make it? Did you? I didn't, and I think I'm pretty educated, but I didn't know until I got into this field. The fish eat other fish, and those fish eat algae, and the algae are the ones that make omega-3. So if you don't feed the fish the right thing, you're not going to get a lot of omega-3 in the fish you eat. So one of the things that we're looking into is in terms of seafood quality, is being able to do a nutritional content, much like you see on your milk or your cheese or your cereal, what all the different percentages are. Well, if you could pay a little bit more and know that the salmon you're buying or the tuna you're buying was raised in a way that you had high omega-3, how much more would you pay for it? 10 cents a pound? 50 bits? I don't know. But that's one of the things the MBCOI is looking into. What is the market for different applications of technology? And I do believe, much like organic foods, anybody eat organic anything? Milk, eggs, cheese? Okay. Most people eat organics because they think it's healthier, because it's less pesticide, less residues, it's less harmful to the environment because you're not adding so many chemicals in. And when you buy organic, you pay more. So there's a market for organic, maybe not 90% of the people, maybe only 25% of the people, but there's a market. So you've got to find the market, you've got to find the right price point, and you see whether or not you can develop it for that price point. And I do believe that people would pay to know the nutritional content of their fish, because we all believe that fish oil and omega-3s are good for us, and they are. So one of the other areas that we're exploring, for example, is, this is an interesting one, wastewater treatment. Most people, waste goes into some system and the municipality cleans it up and returns some water and gets rid of sludge. That's okay. Well, there's an interesting technology that's been developed using algae again, where they actually grow the algae on the wastewater. So there's a lot of phosphorus and nitrogen and carbon that comes out in the wastewater. So they actually construct a system so the algae grows in these tubes, and when the algae finishes growing, the water comes out clean. Clean enough to use for irrigation, and in some cases with additional minor treatment, clean enough to be potable, to drink. So that's really exciting, especially in areas where water is very scarce. Well, what do you do with all that algae you just grew? Interesting. They are actually looking at a business model where they'll come in and they'll set it up for you and treat your waste. And then if you don't want that algae, they'll take it away at no charge. Why? Because they have somebody wants to buy it and make bioplastics out of it. So one of the things that we're trying to do with the MBCOI is develop the concept that there is no waste product. There's just a new source for another product. And if we can continue to think that way, we'll be able to develop a sustainable ecosystem using marine biotechnology. So what are some of the applications of marine biotechnology? Well, the last slide kind of gave you an overview. These are very, very specific. Adhesives, agriculture, John mentioned that. A lot of the chemistries that come out of the marine environment can be used as pesticides or herbicides or growth promotants. So it's not as if you can just use them for pharmaceuticals. So there's a large agricultural application. Aquaculture. How many of you ever seen Dr. Watanabe's aquaculture facility or the oyster hatchery here, right? Very, very exciting. Today, we get 90% of our protein from terrestrial-based organisms. And I just said that the ocean was 70% of the Earth's surface. So that means we're getting most of our source from a very small amount of our planet, to use the right term for this audience, our planet. Well, as we grow in our population, we expect to hit about 9 billion by the year 2050. And there will not be enough protein based on our predictions to feed that population. Certainly not from the terrestrial environment. So a lot of people, organizations, industries, government, are interested in developing aquaculture to a large sustainable method. And just like any process, it's going to take time. But some countries, like Norway, are very, very advanced in terms of doing large ocean cultivation of salmon. Would make sense. Salmon, Norway, it's good. But there are a lot of other areas, like Thailand and Asia and Mexico. The U.S. actually, let me ask you the question. What percentage of seafood do you think the U.S. imports to feed the population in the U.S.? Is it 20%, 50%, 90%? Very good. Very smart audience. Yes, we import a large, if not all, of our seafood. And yet we have great research facilities, great capacity, and it's a good economic basis. But we haven't invested in that. Why? Because we get a lot of what we need protein-wise from terrestrial sources. North Carolina is at the top in terms of protein source from terrestrial aspects. Hogs, chicken, yeah, we're a really good supplier of protein. So one of the things that we want to do is to capitalize on some of the technologies, like what's going on at UNCW and elsewhere, to try to develop aquaculture to a point that we can replace that protein, and maybe replace it with a healthier version in terms of high omega-3. So again, when we think about a process, we try to think about all the impacts of that process, as opposed to just one aspect. So what I've done here is I've kind of emphasized pharmaceuticals, mostly because people understand pharmaceuticals. They know that new drugs mean health benefits and they're willing to pay for it. Let's see, I think the last time I checked, more than half of the drugs on the market today have an origin as a natural product. And that doesn't mean they're extracted today as a natural product from some source, but they were discovered initially as a natural product. Like penicillin. Anybody know where that originally came from? Mold. Fungus. I always like to tell a story when I would teach in elementary school to some of the kids about, I used to harass my boys all the time to clean up their room. You know, God only knows what's growing underneath their bed, on their plate, or their glass. And then one day my son got really smart and said, but you know, Mom, it could be the next penicillin. That's how Fleming discovered it. He was not very good at cleaning up after himself, and he left them around for a long, long time, and came back one day and noticed this fuzzy stuff. And the bacteria that he had been growing on the plate was lysing, was clearing, was disappearing. And so I thought, well, that's odd. Let me go figure out what that is. And that's the basis of scientific discovery. It really is a lot of observation. He could have easily said, ooh, that's ugly. Let me go wash that out and get rid of it. And we never would have had penicillin. But it's also serendipity. He was sloppy. He left his plates around. And then he applied his powers of observation. So I think that people think great science comes from somebody sitting in the lab and doing exactly what's supposed to be done, and they go, aha, I've got what I wanted. Most of the important discoveries in science have come from accidents or serendipity, where somebody did something, didn't expect it, and went, oh, well, that's interesting. And they're smart enough to pursue it. So that's what we're trying to do with the MBCOI, is be smart enough to pursue those things that maybe wasn't exactly where you wanted to go. So with pharmaceuticals, we believe that marine microbes represent a new, as I say, bull market. If this was the stock exchange and the Dow, you would be saying, oh, this is really not very good. It's going down. So the discovery of new chemical agents for pharmaceutical use were usually from terrestrial organisms called actinomycetes. And over the years, because people kept looking at the same place and the same sources, they kept finding the same thing. So the discovery of new compounds was trailing off. And people started to explore the marine environment more. Well, as most of you know, exploring the marine environment takes a lot more effort than exploring the terrestrial environment. You walk out your door, dig up a piece of dirt, throw it in the lab, you're good. But if you want to explore the basin of the ocean or an estuary, you're going to need a boat, you may need specialized equipment, you might need diving, you might need diving training. So it's a little harder to explore that. And that's why it took so long for it to take off. But what you can see is when you look in a new environment, because of that diversity, the chemical and genetic diversity that exists, you're likely to find novel chemistries. The hard part is then you find it, then you got to find a use for it. So that's part of the serendipity and discovery. How many of you are familiar with Dr. Baden's research on the brevinols and its application for cystic fibrosis? Very exciting. And typically, not a common mode of action in terms of what people would use for screening. And I'm sure Dan has explained some of the processes he led to the discovery, but often the discovery of the actual application is different than what you were looking for initially. I'd like to use some examples that are in the pharmaceutical industry today that most people don't know how they were discovered. How many people know of Rogaine for hair growth? Right. And it actually works pretty well. Does anybody know what its real name is and what its real use was? High blood pressure. So they were giving it to men who had high blood pressure. And the men were coming in going, yeah, doc, I don't know about my blood pressure, but it's filling in nicely here. And the pharmaceutical company went, let me think about that. Lots of drugs for blood pressure, not so many for hair growth. Let's see what we can do with this. And it created $1 billion industry by an accident, by powers of observation, because the patients reported a side effect, which became one of the key drivers. There are other drugs like that. The little blue pill, and I don't mean Nexium, was discovered also by a side effect for men taking it for blood pressure. And we all know that that became a very big market. So, powers of observation, what you're looking for may not be what's most important, and so you need to keep pursuing. So what about the MBCOI? Well, we were created to help capitalize on the excellent research in North Carolina that's ongoing in the marine sciences. And what we did last year when we were setting out our business plan and going to the North Carolina Biotechnology Center with our budget to indicate how we're going to spend their money judiciously to try to drive value, we developed 4 key programs. First and foremost is the marine assets inventory. I look at the inventory as the intellectual capital, which can include all of you. It's the knowledge and expertise and interest and passion that helps us understand what we can do with it. In addition, the intellectual property. Most people think of it as just patents. But it's more than that. It's know-how, it's trade secrets, it's just invention disclosures. We've come across situations as we go around and literally interview faculty, corporations, nonprofit organizations. We actually talk to people one-on-one and take an interview and process that into a template and are creating a database. Right now we have about 250 entries. And in the process of talking to somebody, you might find out that they think, hey, I'm developing a laser pointer. I'm going, no, I can use that to guide my way at night. It's not just a laser pointer. It gives me enough light to open a keyhole on a door or something. So we try to help them see beyond what they think they're doing the research for, much like the little blue pill. grants and contract research services. One of the things that we do is we're trying to reach more globally. So we're looking at all kinds of opportunities for funding. And then we're trying to match it with the people that we've met and the research they're doing and try to show them how, well, maybe you're looking for a widget, but if you went for a wadget, you would fit into this funding opportunity. And it's really close, and it's still of interest to you. Why don't you consider it? So we've actually helped some people readdress some of their research, still keeping their interests, true, but addressing it in a way that they might be able to secure additional funding. In addition, there are grants from the federal government, SBIRs and STTRs, that are really geared towards business development. And what it requires, an STTR requires an academic partner, an SBIR does not. But often, what we do is when we meet a faculty member who is interested in doing research in a certain area, and we know a company who has an interest in that, then we encourage them to partner together, because the two of them together might be able to get funding in advance of technology that neither of them alone could get. So we try to enhance those kinds of interactions and collaborations. Technology commercialization services. What we have found is that there are lots of technologies that exist in universities, and most people have heard of tech transfer offices, and they identify potential licensees for technology and then help license it out so that the money can come back in and help develop more research. What we have found is that often those technology offices are very overburdened. One technology officer I spoke to had 1,000 invention disclosures that he was responsible for. 1,000. I can keep track of that many. I don't know if you can, but I certainly can. So what we try to do is say, let us take on your marine biotechnology related invention disclosures. Let us try to find a potential partner for them. And in that process, if we're successful, then we'll get a little something back because we're helping you, and you're going to get most of the money, and we're just going to get paid for some service. So that's one of the concepts. But the one that I really am very interested in is this Translational Marine Biotechnology Collective. As I said, you've got to get to a market. You've got to commercialize. You've got to develop a product or a service that people are going to pay for. And one of the things is that when you are working independently, just like I needed Melissa to come in here and put the microphone on, you need somebody else to kind of augment your technology. And what we're doing is we're going to create, in essence, a virtual institute. I've already identified about 4 or 5 organizations that have collections of natural products or organisms from the marine environment that are interested in pooling them together so that we could then, on their behalf, go to a potential industry partner and ask for support for developing those organisms or chemistries. The concept is called the first rights or first option. And it's very common in the pharmaceutical industry. If you've paid attention in the literature to a lot of the big pharmas like GSK or Novartis, you will see that they will spend anywhere $5, $10, $20 million to be able to look at a university's inventions before anybody else. When I worked at the Scripps Research Institute, we had an agreement with Novartis, and they gave them $20 million a year just to sit at the table and get served first. They could do whatever they wanted with that money, but Novartis had first rights. They didn't get to keep it. They still had to take a license and option it, but they got to see it before anybody else. That's a pretty good deal. And for Novartis, $20 million wasn't that much money, as opposed to trying to do all the, there's like 90-some faculty there and involved in many different areas of research. So it was really quite good to have that research ongoing for very little investment. So we're looking at trying to build a virtual collective. Instead of having a single institute, there might be technology here at UNCW, another one at Institute of Marine Science at Chapel Hill, another one at Wake Forest, and one at a university in San Diego, that together could be more compelling than any one by itself. So as we collect our inventory, we're looking at putting those pieces together and making a nice whole picture that would be more attractive. And what's our network? Well, anybody and everybody, including you. So when you take the information back, if you have an idea, if you've heard a talk, if you think it could be interesting, send me an email. We're happy to explore what opportunities might come our way. Oops. So on here you'll see we're focusing on, in the North Carolina area, of course, universities, And we've actually worked with all the technology transfer offices currently. I think we've conducted about 90 interviews, one-on-one personal interviews, in addition to doing our electronic searches. So we're working our way through it. The private sector is very important. I was actually talking to angel investor today about a technology I think could be useful in the city of Wilmington. And so I have to get some more information and put together a little mini proposal, and we'll see where it can go. But in addition, we have regional and federal opportunities. And again, what we're trying to do is take it across the United States, and even more interestingly, is take it across the world. In today's economy, there is no border. What happens in Japan with the nuclear power plant exploding affects us. And the same thing, what happens here is going to affect the rest of the world. So why think of your economy as just regional if you can strengthen it by international relations? So here's some ideas of some of the resources released that we've already identified as interesting, not only to us, but in terms of what we've done by polling industry and understanding what their needs are. Marine natural products collections, I've already mentioned that. So this would be multiple collections of organism strains and fractions, as well as active pharmaceutical ingredients. And we would look at analytical and assay capabilities and put this into, as I said, a virtual organization that would allow access from industry partners. The beauty of this is that we can sell it over and over and over again. You get to use it for a pharmaceutical agent, you get to use it for agriculture, you get to use it for aquaculture. So if they're interested in probing the collection, they are limited in how they can develop it, their field of use. So it's kind of a nice way to recirculate and recycle your assets. In water and food, well, we talked about omega-3 content in seafood, and we think that there's an interest there in trying to do a nutritional content on seafood. But more importantly, 30% of the seafood sold in the United States is misidentified. So if you think you're buying some high-end fish, it could be a really low-end bottom feeder, and you won't know the difference. After they put all that sauce and everything else on it, you can't tell the difference. So why does that happen? Sometimes it's intentional. People are trying to make more money and charge more for something that's not of value. Sometimes it's unintentional. They looked at it, didn't know what it was. Hey, we'll call it halibut. I don't know what it is. Well, we think that there's a market for a seafood identification kit that could be used at point of use in terms of maybe even the consumer. If you can develop a dipstick to test your sugar level by a prick on your finger, it's conceivable you could have a dipstick to test the fish and see whether or not it is what you thought. And you might say, well, why would I care? Okay, so I lost a little money. I thought I was eating halibut and it was really, tilapia. Okay, whatever. Well, there are people who are allergic to certain types of foods. And it's not just I'm allergic to shellfish, but I'm okay with everything else. I met recently a woman who was allergic to a specific type of fish. And so I said, would you pay to be able to test the fish before you ate it and make sure it wasn't the one you were allergic to? And she said, yeah, because she can't eat fish out unless she's really certain of the source. So I think there is a market. In addition, aquaculture, we talked about the aquaculture ongoing here. So there is some interesting technology with Dr. Watanabe's black sea bass. And there are ways to maybe think about expanding that so that it could be used locally as well as more nationally. And of course, it's considered a delicacy. I actually read a newspaper article recently of a local Wilmington restaurant that is importing a type of fish, branzia, from Turkey. Now, I've never had branzia. Has anybody ever had it? Oh, world travelers, I guess, huh? Not only do they import it once a week, but they actually announce it on their Facebook page, and you get to pre-order your meal. So obviously, you like the fish, and you're willing to go and look for it. So if you had another delicacy, like black sea bass, but it was only available on certain times, and we did an eBay auction, opening bid, $10 a pound, and you were interested in that fish, you'd go and say, okay, yeah, what the heck, maybe I'll get it for $10.50. Maybe it'll go up to $12. But either way, it becomes an interesting commercial market. So keep that in mind. You may see that coming into a town near you. types of technologies that we've identified. Chitin and chitosan is actually an interesting one to use in desalination and waste cleanup. Again, you'll see a lot of common themes coming back. And one of the things that we're trying to do is marry technologies to each other. So we might be able to marry this chitosan foam for waste cleanup with the algae, because there may be too much waste for the algae to handle, so then you go over here and use a chitosan, or you get a spill. Like we've had with our local municipality, there's been a few spills because of the excess rain. Throw in the chitosan foam and suck it all up so that it doesn't have a deleterious effect on the environment. And this is most recent. This is a imaging facility that's being established up in Morehead City at NC State. They got a very nice instrument, and it's going to be used for what we call metabolomics, which is basically metabolism. But what it allows you to do is actually look inside the organism and see what's going on. And while that's been done in animals or in people with other imaging equipment, it hasn't been applied really to marine organisms. So now they're going to be able to do that with their marine organisms that they're studying. So it's a tremendous advance, and we think that there could be room for industrial partnerships and actually make money to help support that research going forward. So here's our locations. This is our headquarters, and as John pointed out, our office is over there, tucked nicely behind the aquarium. We have probably the best view. We look outside and see all those pretty fishes going by. It's great. Then we also established an office up in Morehead City at NC State. NC State was very kind and gave us office space in their building. In addition, we have an office in RTP. If any of you are familiar with the Friends of First Flight, it was an incubator, and still is, an incubator system for new technology companies. And they do have lab space. We are just renting an office. But the interesting part about it is being very frugal-minded with state money. Instead of having 3 big offices and paying for all the infrastructure in Raleigh, all we have to do is reserve a room. So we pay a flat fee for the year, which is very nominal. And whenever we need an office, we just go online and reserve a room, a conference room for a big audience, or a smaller office for just one-on-one meetings. And everything is supplied. All the utilities, administration, we have our own mailbox. It's great. So there are many ways to advance a program without spending, inordinate amounts of dollars. How many of you saw the announcement in the paper in the last couple of days about BioMarine? Good, excellent. BioMarine is an international meeting that brings together key executives from the biomarine industry. Think people like the CEO of Novus International, which is one of the leading supplier of feed for aquaculture and livestock. In addition, they bring together government agencies as well as scientists, and they put them together in essence, think tanks on key themes. And of course, aquaculture, nutraceuticals, pharmaceuticals, regulatory aspects, regulatory policy. It's actually hard to do aquaculture off the coast because there's a lot of regulations about waste and the impact on the coastal integrity, I guess is the best way to say it. So this meeting is devoted to how do we overcome those hurdles and make the most out of our biomarine economy. And in Halifax last week, there were about 250 participants. There was over 700 one-to-one meetings. That's one of the key things they do. They set up partnering meetings so that you can talk to somebody specifically about something of interest to you. And that has led to, in the past, many different deals. There will come out of this meeting a total of how many meetings, how many partnering meetings happen and what the total contracts that develop. We had a very strong showing thanks to the Department of Commerce. They set up a booth there and allowed us to display our technologies and assets. The Crest campus was prominently focused, as well as the MBCOI and several smaller companies from North Carolina. What's most interesting is that we were able to secure the meeting for Wilmington in 2015. So we are going to bring an international convention on biomarine to this city in 2015. And to give you an idea of the prominence, it was in Nantes, France, Paris, London, Halifax, Cascais in Portugal next year, and then Wilmington. In addition, because the MBCOI has been an active participant in this meeting in the last year, We were asked to be one of the founding members of a new BioMarine Industrial Cluster Association, again raising visibility not only to Wilmington and North Carolina, but the whole United States. So we are a founding member, I'll be on the board of directors, and our mission is to champion marine bioresources and their sustainable and innovative utilization, and to really federate across borders, national and international. And goals is really increase the exploitation of these resources in order across all sectors, as we talked about. Pharmaceuticals, agriculture, nutraceuticals, anything you can think of, we want to advance it. This is just some information, and as I said, I have a brochure up there, a little pamphlet that'll give you some information and contact information if you want to ask more or contact us. I'll be outside for a while and happy to talk to you. And I just want to leave you with this. In honor of the theme, Planet Ocean, it really is a planet, and the MBCOI wants to encourage you to fathom the opportunities with us, to help us bring innovation to light, and help us translate marine science into products and services. Thank you very much for your attention. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer now. If you want to go eat and drink, that's okay. I'll meet you out there.
What's going on at One Cheese?
So One Cheese is now the site of the new Coastal Studies Institute. It was in Manio, and then they built a beautiful state-of-the-art facility that opened in January. And I strongly encourage you to contact Nancy White, who's the director up there. I'm sure she'd be happy to host a tour. It is just fantastic. You're welcome. Any other questions? Yes?
One of the things that has always struck me about this, and it is interesting to see how you're trying to circumvent or overcome the problem that I see, is the connection between what science has to offer and what industry is looking for, particularly because of things like trade secrets and research and development. To give you an example, if I'm a pharmaceutical company that's been working on a particular solution through development of a drug, but one of my problems is decay, and I just can't get a product that's ready for market. How do you put that need together, knowing that that company's invested thousands, probably millions perhaps, and doesn't really want to share the shortfalls with what over here might be the answer?
I think a lot of it comes down to relationship building. So if you send an email to them, they wouldn't pay attention. But if you have this connection and you're sitting there and you're talking to them and you're passionate about what you can do, and you can show them some of the successes that you've had in other areas, then you have a chance to come to an agreement and terms. And I always use the analogy that we've all heard of mutual non-disclosures or confidentiality agreements, right? All they do is, it's just like a patent. They just give you a right to sue. You know, you've got to trust the person you're talking to before you even sign the agreement. Otherwise, you can't wait for that agreement to help save you for whatever you shared with that person or that organization. So I'm a firm believer that you need to find out who's playing in what area, what they have, and try to anticipate what their needs are. And there's lots of ways to figure that out. And then make the connection. I mean, literally, much of this past year has just been making connections with each of the institutions, all the faculty, as well as industry, to find out what their needs are and where they want to go and how we can help facilitate that.
May I ask one? Well, for someone else. How do you incentivize the faculty, the scientists, all of whom perhaps are driven by their grants, driven by their research needs, pay attention?
That's a very good question, and the answer is there is no one answer. There isn't. I have met faculty who, and I try to adjust my words depending on who I'm talking to. Some faculty do not want to be commercial. That's a bad word. So I say, okay, but you're doing this great research. Why are you doing this research? Well, I want to benefit the public. I'm a state employee. I get grants. I want to benefit the public. I say, great. Let me help you get that benefit to the public. And in the meantime, you might get some money back to help do more research to bring more benefit to the public. So again, it's that one-on-one personal relationship that you have to develop to understand what motivates them and then try to work with them to feel comfortable with what you're trying to do. to help them, to help the public, and to get the technology out there where it can do its good. You have a question?
Yeah. I'm aware of a pharmaceutical company that, and I don't remember the names of the sites and the situation that they identify themselves as, but they would put out and say, we will pay $15,000 if you can give us the formula to convert this chemical to this chemical. All right, now, and some little guy over in India, he's figured it out, and he'll make $15,000. But that piece might be a piece of a much larger puzzle that they have to solve in developing a product. Now, they didn't give away too much information, but they got some help, and they put it out worldwide.
Mhm.
And I think it served itself well. I don't know whether it's still going on.
It does. It does in various industries, and that's why the internet is so popular, because you can put out that kind of question, set the prize, and then wait to have it come back to you. And basically they sign away their rights. They say, okay, I take the 15,000, you get it. When I worked in industry, whatever we discovered belonged to the company. And so literally you had to sign an agreement that whatever you discovered belonged to the company, and they profited from everything, which was fine because they were paying you a salary. But to make it legal, they used to give us $1, because you have to have a money transaction on a specific contract to really enforce it in a court of law. So you sold it for $1. Not that you had a choice, right? But in any case, there are actually other prizes and foundations that have been very successful. Just today, I was at a luncheon that Sharon Decker was speaking at, our head of the Department of Commerce for North Carolina. And the announcement was made yesterday. Branson, the gentleman who founded Virgin Atlantic, he had financed a prize to try to reduce CO2 emissions in the world. And so anybody could apply, and they had a little triage system. Guess who the winner was? BioMarine of Raleigh, North Carolina. Woohoo! €500,000, which is about $650,000. Pretty darn good. And what did she invent? She invented a way to take bacteria, marine bacteria in some cases, and make bricks. Bricks. So I encourage you to look it up on the internet, BioMarine. Ginger Dossier is the CEO. She's a phenomenal lady. And she was basically in architecture and building and all that kind of stuff, and thought there's got to be a better way, because when you make bricks normally, you put out a lot of CO2 apparently from the process. So she's developed a process that sucks out CO2 instead of adding CO2. Pretty inventive. Any other questions? People are getting hungry. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Prize. You know, one of the things that before I'll make a statement on Deb's behalf, one of the things that we're happy about is, whether you realize it or not, and we've talked to you about it over the last couple of years, is that the federal and state money to support university research is drying up. We have to expand our portfolio, or we're not going to keep places like the CMS Center alive, or the new center up in Manio. We're just not going to keep these alive and make the discoveries that are important to you. The cost of university research is very expensive, but nowhere near expensive as an industry. So we're very glad to have Deb here and help to identify a lot of those things. We've been working with her. She actually came up and participated. We're in the Marine Science Review of the state of North Carolina, and she actually participated in the interpretation when we tried to interpret the results of that review, and there's a report coming out. She was very prominent in working with us on that. So there's a lot of things that she brings up here. And of course, in the spirit of Planet Ocean, once again, we give Deb a little
I like the wrapping paper.
present, once again, by Dume Gorham.
Thank you. That is the logo.
Recognized as the logo for her company.
Isn't that lovely?
So I'm sure Deb will be here to talk to you guys while we're having, but dinner is served.